Hi everybody, welcome to Vintage Books Live with Jason LaPier and Bailey Potter, who contributed to Dispatches from ANARRES, the tribute to Ursula K. LeGuin that was published by Forest Avenue Press, and we should be getting in the store hopefully tomorrow. I'm just going to sit here real quick and add Jason and Bailey here, so just give me a minute. All right. Hopefully they will be. Yay! Hello.
Hey.
Thank you so much for popping in to join us. I am just going to turn off commenting for a little while so that comments are not in front of your faces. But there is a questions feature for everybody that's watching. There's a question feature, a little circle with a question mark in it that you can click on if you want to ask any questions. That way you can still ask questions even though I've turned comments off. We're just finding that the comments end up in front of guests' faces, and so we can't see the people that we're talking to. So we'll turn that off, and that will make it easier for us to see everybody. So hi, I'm so glad you could join us. So once again, for people who are just popping in, we are visiting tonight with Bailey Potter, who was the copy editor, I believe, on Dispatches from ANARRES, and Jason LaPier, who's one of the contributors to the anthology. It was published by Forest Avenue Press. It's been trickling out in the area a little bit for the last few weeks. At Vintage Books, we're supposed to get our copies in tomorrow, so we're really excited about that. And so we're just going to chat a little bit tonight. So I was hoping to start with, this is a tribute to Ursula K. LeGuin, which I'm sure most people have heard of, but she was an author that was very much associated with Portland. She was groundbreaking in her work in science fiction, but she also wrote memoir and other genres. And I'm curious from both of you what your personal connection is to Ursula K. Le Guin and how you came to have a contribution to this anthology. So Jason, if you don't mind starting.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been a fan for a long time. I think I kind of really discovered probably about I think like in the early days when ebooks first started to come out, like the very early days, I started to like catch up on a backlog of like everything that I had never had a chance to read, and she was one of the authors on my list, and I started reading the Hanish cycle books and just kind of like couldn't stop reading, like kind of just plowed right through them and really loved them. And as at the time, more of an aspiring writer, or like kind of dabbling back then, I just, her imagination and her, like, the things that she was doing was so much different. Especially, like I said, because I'm doing all this catch up, I was kind of reading a lot of the classics, and there's a lot of, kind of fun old sci-fi stories, but they weren't really, by today's standards, they weren't really, they felt a little formulaic by today's standards. They weren't back then, but her stuff didn't, never felt formulaic. It was both deep and broad, deep with the characters and broad on the world building. And yeah.
Bailey, what was your relationship with Ursula K. Le Guin before the book? And then how did you end up working on the project?
I think I was also kind of a latecomer to Le Guin. I started to read her when I was a bachelor's degree. And I was taking a couple classes from an instructor who was a really big fan of French twins. And so I ended up reading all of the series first, and that was such an amazing experience. And that's kind of where I started. And then once I was in my master's program for book publishing, Laura Stanfill, who is the publisher of Forest Avenue Press, was my editing instructor. And
neat.
Yeah, I guess showed her that I loved fantasy so much and wanted to work on editing those projects like, do you want to come on and edit this book? And I said yes, of course. And it was a great experience.
That's great. So I'm interested, Bailey, since we're chatting about how you came to work with the work. So I know that you worked on the copy editing, and copy editing is such a different animal from like developmental editing or line editing, in that you have to like pay attention to like all the pebbles on the path, like the I's and the T's, and is everything, you know, are the periods in the right place and stuff. And sometimes I know that when I do it myself, it's hard to get, it's easy to get caught up in the story and then forget that I was supposed to be making sure that that was all right. So how do you copy edit something that is also something that you really care about without like forgetting that you're supposed to be copy editing?
For one, it's hard. And for two, for copy editing, you have to read at so much of a slower pace, and I feel like you have to work both sides of your brain simultaneously. And so I read things aloud, usually just under my breath. My boyfriend calls it speaking in Slytherin. It helps. It gets me to slow down. It really gets me to kind of focus on what I'm reading, but also, yeah, picking up the pebbles, trying to figure out that everything is working correctly, everything is consistent. Like, especially with names, you get a lot of difficult names to keep track of in your story process. But yeah, I definitely have to slow down.
Yeah. So that gives me a good segue to jump back over to Jason and talk about your story. I was very fascinated by so for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it yet, it's a, well, you know what? I'm not even going to say. I'm going to let Jason read the portion that he wants to read from it instead of giving anything away, and then we can chat about a little bit more about it after you've had a chance to do that. So if you wouldn't mind, I know you picked something out that you were going to read, and we could do that now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that now. Okay. This is called Beekeeper. Ka's cup was empty. He left his branch and flew to the bush where the other drones buzzed. There was a queue to the hollow crotch between two branches where the meat fermented. He shoved past the other drones. They flinched and danced angrily in reaction, then saw him and settled into a sulk, giving him space. He bumped up to the lip of the bark and dipped his cup, then settled in, forcing the others to go around his bulk. He ignored the smells of their complaints. They were all of different hives, all rejected, of course. None of them had been lucky enough to mate before the end of their short lives, else their lives would have been even shorter. Left to their own devices, most drones drifted off to expire in peace. But there had been something in the air, a sign, a hint. Come to the dark woods. There were no hives in the dark woods, as the presence of black bears discouraged it. But a drone wasn't one for questioning, and many came to follow the scent left only for them. Left by some kind of charity, someone who brought honey to the dark woods, tending to the wayward drones. The drones didn't know why and didn't much care. A few of the more industrious among them pooled honey and water together with bits of pear skins, and soon there was mead, and then they cared even less. Their benefactors appeared periodically, dancing blessings. Like most drones, Ka wasn't much for philosophy. A drone had a part in the purpose of bees, but it was not lifelong. These bee folk that brought honey and extracted gratitude were an odd bunch. The sisters in his hive had called them boxheads, a subclassification of boxers, words that had no meaning to Ka. So what? Ka mumbled into his mead. He eyed the boxheads as they buzzed closer. Most days he ignored them, but then again, most days he took his cup deeper into the dark woods and nodded off. This time was different. They were circling, buzzing and dancing. Through the encroaching mead haze, he saw them seeking him out. What? He said when they came near. Greetings, fellow Be Kind, their leader said. Ka peered at her with his oversized eyes. She was young and looked strong, near her peak. Still, she was a third his size. My name is Hananaha, she said, settling in close to him. He leaned away from her slightly, steadying himself on the lip of the bark. And? I understand your bitterness, she said softly. By way of response, he drank noisily. You are still a brother, even if your hive expelled you. Ka looked at her. Doesn't your hive beat out your drones? She dropped her head as though sadness overtook her. It is the way. Drones cannot stay in the hive, but we still care. That's why we come here. She gestured at the bush, or maybe all of the dark woods. That's why we bring you honey. Does the honey not nurture? Aye, but it's better when it rots a bit. Ka shot a look at the nearby cluster of drones, who pretended to join in his mirth. Hananaha nodded at her companions. We have come here sunrise after sunrise. You alone are always here. You've lived longer than most brothers. So what? He pulled the mead up as though he would drink, then lowered it, disgusted with himself, with their observation. I don't know why. I have no purpose. We can give you a purpose, she said. He frowned. My sisters warned me about your kind, boxheads. Mankind serves us with those boxes, saves us with those boxes. She leaned a little closer. They are power. They are shelter. They truly save us. I got no interest in your religion, miss, or any religion. She looked away, then looked back at him. Have you interest in justice? I don't even know what that means. You were cast out, unable to serve your part in the purpose. She touched him, causing him to flinch. None dared touch him, and yet she had. What if you could use your last days to right that wrong? Ka glared at this brave worker, his abdomen twitching, waving a phantom stinger. How? Take vengeance on those that cast you out. What? Attack my hive, my queen? You're the strongest drone any of us has ever seen. Your colony, your queen, saw to that. Miss, you might not notice this, but drones don't get the weapon. Again, his abdomen twitched impotently. We can give you a weapon. You are strong enough. Ka shook his head. I don't know what you mean, but it don't matter. I can fly fast, but I can't fly far. I don't know how to get back to my hive, and if I did, they would smell me. We can take care of that. We have strong workers who will lift you together, and you don't need to go to your hive. We know where you can find the heretical queens, unsheltered. He drained his cup and pushed away from the mead well. Enough of this talk, foxheads. I'm going to sleep. They backed away from him. We'll be back, Hananaha said firmly. Sleep well. Tomorrow you must decide. Ka shook his head. Whatever. With a grunt, he took flight, swarming dizzily in search of the tiny hole in the rotten tree he called home.
Thank you. I'm curious what part of LeGuin was the inspiration for this story that you wrote?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because when this anthology idea first got announced, I kind of got really excited and had all of these ideas about doing, some kind of future version of Portland, or really getting into the ideas around ANARRES, and from the dispossessed, and I went reread the dispossessed, and I really kind of really got into that, but then I just couldn't. You can't force a story, and even though I was pulling at all these threads, I just I wasn't getting anywhere. But the idea that that some of her stories used animals to kind of tell the story, that that kind of stuck in the back of my mind, and I thought there was something interesting about bees specifically for me, because they are such a there's so much more to them than on the surface. That they're the way that the more that we study them, the more we learn about how they communicate and how they have societies, and they have jobs, and I just really found all of that fascinating, and then thought like there was a way to connect some of the topics around I was like socialism, or working together more as a society to and progressive values, but also kind of like blending in like that. There's I think one thing I really, especially on rereading The Dispossessed, what really struck me is that like there are all these ideals, but they also run into reality, and so there's kind of like this, there's never a perfect solution, and you have real people in the mix. So the way that she blends that together, really kind of inspired me.
That's just, yeah, that's very interesting, because I think the interesting thing about an anthology that is in tribute is that everybody comes at it from a different angle. Like all of the stories grow out of the writer's relationship with in this case Ursula K. LeGuin, but everybody came at we all take stories and at some level make them our own. And so I think that one of the magic things about an anthology like this is we get a little window into all the ways people make stories their own, even though we've read all the same story, that we see all these different really creative things coming out of basically the same inspiration, which is so cool. Do you, Bailey, have, since we've gotten to hear a little bit about Jason's story, and do you have another story in the book that you particularly enjoyed, and can you tell us a little bit about it so people can get a little bit of an idea of or even a couple of others, that so people can get a little bit idea of the flavor of some of the other stories?
Yeah, they're all so good. I really can't recommend just reading the whole book from cover to cover. But I really also liked Rachel K. Jones's The Night Bazaar for Women Becoming Reptiles. Thought that one was a really neat idea, freedom and choice, but also kind of luck, and just also the way she handles relationships in that story particularly was really interesting. I also really enjoyed Molly Gloss's Winona's Gift. That one kind of had a twist to it that I didn't expect. Girls kind of becoming a woman, becoming an adult, and she has to pass an initiation. I don't want to give anything away, so I won't get too far into it, but those twists are so LeGuinian. I heard that recently at another
Yeah. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm
awesome.
taken over.
But it's so great to see all of the stories and how interconnected they are in themes, and just you can see the threads of Gwen in all of them. And I actually wrote my thesis for my master's degree on the influence of Ursula Le Guin, inspired by this project. And so it's really neat to like go back and revisit the book again. And now that I've done all that extra research.
Oh, that's very cool. Is there, since you got to read all of the stories, as the copy editor, are there common themes that you think ran through the whole book, even though you had all these like really interesting and varied ways of tackling the tribute? Are there things that you found like people brought up over and over again that you noticed as you were reading through all the stories?
Yeah, I think perspective was a big one. Gigi Little also did an animal perspective, which was right before Jason's story in the book. That was really well put in terms of the stories, but also anthropology and sense of richness of culture in all the stories. That's something that LeGuin really did because of her father too. Her father was a very famous anthropologist, and her mother was a writer as well. And you can kind of see influences in these stories. So yeah. Great.
Jason, did you have have you gotten to read some of the other stories? And if so, were there others that you also appreciated?
I haven't yet. I think I'm also waiting on my contributor copy. And so I went to the Powell's to grab one because I've got, well, this is for you, Mom, if you're out there watching. I picked it up to send to you. But yeah, it's funny that I noticed Gigi's story, right? The story right before Beekeeper. So I was kind of like reading a little bit of that, and I was like, oh, I think this is for some reason I'm going to start in the middle and then
That's great.
my way out.
And I'm assuming you can kind of do that with it because it's an anthology, that you can jump around a little bit, and that's very cool. Yeah, no, we've been anxiously awaiting it, and so we're supposed to get our copies tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to going to work tomorrow, and that, I mean, that's going to sound very, very planned segue, but it actually wasn't. But you can order on the website. For those of you watching, that sounded like a very sneaky segue, but it really wasn't. You can order, either pre-order or come into the store. Hopefully tomorrow. I'll post in the morning when I get in there to make sure that we really do get them, because with all the supply chain stuff, sometimes we think we're going to get something on a certain date and we don't. But hopefully tomorrow we will have them. And I really appreciate both of you coming and talking to us tonight. It was fun to chat, and I'm going to pop open the question thing really quick to make sure there's not questions that are sitting here. But I don't see any. So I think we'll close up for tonight. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming and visiting. And hopefully you all who are watching can get your hands on a copy of Dispatches from, is it ANARRES? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Or
ANARRES.
ANARRES, yeah. So, and it's an anthology, and it's from Forest Avenue Press, and hopefully coming out to all of us tomorrow. So be looking for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.